I'm not sure if the last video recorded, we had some problems with the recording. So it's running a little late. I have to go to teach in the yeshiva. But we just spoke. If we, if you weren't, if we were, if it didn't go through, I'll just go over that we just spoke about the halacha of Tfilas Havinenu. Tfilas Havinenu is an abbreviated form of the Shemoneh Esrei. And generally we don't say it, but in certain cases it's possible that we should say certain people in certain situations probably should avail themselves of this, depending on the situation and different issues. Anyway, let's put that aside right now, and I will get back to it in a minute, or a few minutes. Today was now it's after Shkia already, but when I got home still, the Yartzeit of the Shevet Mussar, Rav Eliyahu Cohen from Izmir, Turkey. And he was a great tzaddik, very holy person, and he wrote a tremendously important, interesting sefer, Minchas Eliyahu. I was introduced to the sefer by someone who I enjoy listening to very much. Harav Ariel Bar Tzadok Shlita is a Rav in Tennessee, a Chacham, a Svardish, a Makubal, an Erlich Yid, and someone who's a very deep thinking person, has a very nice website. And anyway, he says that, this Sefer Minchas Eliyahu, the so I'll say Deborah B'Shem Amro, who I learned it from. Minchas Eliyahu is a sefer that talks about stories of practical Kabbalah. But they're not stories that are brought just to say, oh, look how holy this man is, that he could do these spooky things. Stories all had a deep Mussar lesson behind them that are very important. And there in Minchas Eliyahu, Shevet Mussar brings an idea, a concept, that when we're dealing with the difference between what he was calling an Eish Shel Kedusha and Eish Shel Tumah, a holy fire, a sacred fire, and an impure fire. And this is something we can refer to a lot of things. Like Rabbi Bar Tzadok pointed out, we compare the cults, Mahavdil, to our holy Torah. The Shevet Mussar says that he has a tradition. An Eish Shel Tumah, an impure fire, is bright on the outside and dark on the inside. Whereas a holy fire is dark on the outside and bright on the inside. Right? Like an ember that's burning, that lasts a long time, not a flame that just goes out. What's the difference? He's not talking a literal fire. It's a parable. Look, like Rabbi Bar Tzadok said, look at the cults. They all look so interesting on the outside, and then you get in and it's hollow, it's empty. And not only is it often empty, but it's harmful often. Not always, but often. Evil, sometimes. And the Torah is just opposite. You get started, you look on the outside, it's you're reading about this ox goring someone else's ox. And this is religion. It's kind of boring. But when you get into it, you realize, no, it's something very deep. Yesterday I went to Levaya, someone who I never remember meeting, big tzaddik, who was here in our county, in Sullivan County, who influenced so many people in such a profound way. It was Reb Shlomo Rottenberg, Zecher Tzadik L'Bracha, was the Rosh Yeshivah in Mountaindale. He passed away on the Yartzeit of the previous Rosh Yeshivah of Mountaindale, Rabbi Davis. And he was talking there, his son-in-law was talking about how he first remembered sitting down learning with Rosh Yeshiva. He was talking about the ecstasy that was experienced to open up a volume of Talmud and start with the Mishnah and the Gemara and the Rashi and the Tosfos, and then he said, and I remember he took the Rambam off the shelf and we learned the Rambam and the Kesef Mishnah. Nobody has that experience in any. I don't think, Lahavdil, I'm a person who's very tolerant and who believes, based on the Navi, and that what I learned from Rabbi Bar Tzadok also, and others, that really Navi teaches us that, and I'm not a chassid of Rabbi Bar Tzadok, but I love him very much. He's a wonderful person, a real person. But he brought up something very, very poignant. The Navi tells us, from the rising of the sun to the setting thereof, great is my name among the nations, says the Lord of hosts. Malachi 1:11. Malachi, the last prophet of the Navi, the last Navi. Malachi, the last prophet of the Bible. And then God goes on there to castigate the Israelites, the Jews. By that time it was only the Jews, for not living up to Torah, meaning we had the true religion and we don't live up to it, and yet an idolater who has falsehood, who's even Chayv Misa for his religion, still God accepts it, and that's on an earthly court, but ultimately God accepts the forbidden worship of an idolater who's a good person, but just ignorant about religion, about the true religion, as if he's worshipping God himself. And the Jew who has a true religion, who has a true revelation, who has a true scripture, who has a true understanding of the scripture, he doesn't treat his friends properly, what's it worth? It's even worse, right? Because he should know better. We have the Torah. That's the Navi. So from that I believe that, spirituality and religion is a valuable thing in the rest of the world, even its fault. A nice, pious, kind, friendly Christian, Muslim, Buddhist, Hindu, Sikh, whoever it is. Muslims and Sikhs are not worshipping idols, but they're still following false religion. Most Christians also not worshipping idols. Some are, some aren't. Even Hindus, you could say, really, ultimately, it's a monotheistic idea. With, we could always be melamed zchus, because really that's what their scripture teaches. That's really only one God, if you see. Buddhist, it's a totally different mindset about religion. It's an anti-religion. But it teaches to be a good person. That's the main thing. But still, they're missing out. It's still better to be Megayer, become a Jew, if you're really serious about it, not just to play games. That's what my Rosh Yeshiva taught me, that's the tachlis of everyone, but not everyone's zeicha to that. Anyway, I can't imagine, now the Pope just retired, and it talks about how he compared it to his predecessor, the previous Pope. As great of a person he was more a celebrity. He was extroverted. This present, or immediately previous Pope, the Pope Emeritus now, is a very introverted person and a scholar, and a tremendous scholar. But with his great scholarship, I can't imagine that when he passes away, that they would eulogize him. I remember when he was a bishop or when he was a cardinal, and he would take St. Thomas Aquinas off the shelf, or he'd take Jerome's Vulgate off the shelf, and the love. Because it's not like that. When we learn Torah, okay, when their studies are also devotion, but it's not the type of connection that we get when we learn Torah. Maybe it is, but I can't imagine. And I'm sure every Ehrlich Yid who would agree with me, of course maybe I'm wrong, maybe they do feel that, maybe they do feel that, I don't know. I never asked anybody. I know they feel it, they open Tehillim, they have I remember talking to a priest and a favorite psalm and this and that. That's a different story. But to talk about a Gemara and a Rashi and a Tosfos and a Kesef and a Rambam and a Kesef Mishnah, I don't think that geschmack anyone else could experience outside of our world. Even though a lot of us don't get into it enough that as we should, and that we have that opportunity. But I just can't imagine. I think that's, as much as spirituality and goodness and everything there could be, I think that's missing. Anyway, so I think that's part of this idea from the Shevet Mussar. But then we get into just a bigger idea. I mentioned the Sikhs. Sikhs are monotheists. And their religion is very interesting. It's also a kind of an anti-religion, not in the same way the Buddhists are. But over time, we just all turn everything into religion. So even Buddhism would start off as an anti-religion, became religion. Sikhism also, the same thing, meaning their custom, for example, they won't eat kosher meat or halal meat because they said it's superstitious to eat something that was slaughtered in a ritualistic way. In their temples, everyone has to sit on the floor. So there was a whole argument in Canada. Some of the old people, it's too cold to sit on the floor. In India, you sat on the floor, it's warm. Maybe it wasn't always warm, I don't know. But in America, in Canada, it was very cold in the wintertime. Why should everyone sit on the floor? Should all be equal? But it's too hard. We could all be equal sitting on chairs also. And it became a big fight, By us, we fight over mechitza, how tall should mechitza be, this, that. They're fighting over should be chairs, There's shuls without chairs also, you should know, in certain countries, but that's a different thing. I think in Singapore, the shuls, they still have sand on the floor, not chairs. But anyway, we have to recognize the big picture. They're missing out. When they're fighting over should there be chairs or no chairs, they're missing the point of what their religion teaches. And the same thing, so a fire of holiness is dark on the outside and bright on the inside, and a fire of tumah is bright on the outside and dark on the inside, but more than that. The Shevet Mussar brings there in Mochas Eliyahu a story, and I'll pause this here, because again, I'm not sure if I'm restricted from uploading something more than 15 minutes. So let's pause this, upload this, and then we'll continue. I'll tell the story from Mochas Eliyahu.